Morning, Bill Carroll, Zenny62 Media, and I am still working my way through my 2024-2025 college football watch list with a focus on players that I believe have at least a chance to play at the next level. Now, that may mean the CFL or UFL in some cases, but these two players are players I believe have at least a legitimate chance, especially if they get to the right All Star game. Hint, hint. Shout out to Jim Nagy and my friend Mr. Ed Galco at the senior and East West Shrine games, respectively. But I'm going to start with Rayshawn. And Rayshawn Harvey is a player that he's gotten a certain amount of publicity and, second team, third team, All American at the D2 level. And while I wouldn't say that that's underselling him, I think he's one of those players that had a great season. He was averaging 97.1 yards receiving per game and had 8 touchdowns and ended up with 971 receiving yards in those 10 games. Really got solid season, but I think the arrow is pointed up. He was a big time, I wouldn't say big time, but he was an underrated but solid, above solid, good prospect at Allardyce, which is a powerhouse Western PA program. Goes to Edinburgh and then finds his way eventually to West Liberty. Has enough size, probably about 6'1" and a quarter, probably about 182 pounds. Could he use another 10 to 12 pounds of muscle? Sure. As you could say about a lot of prospects working their way up from D2, but he has everything else you're looking for. Catch radius, body control, route running, second level speed. He can pull away from people. He's not afraid to run across the middle of the field. And while the rule changes made that maybe a little less hazardous than it used to be, he still is not a guy who plays afraid ever. Also, gives you a little pop in the kick return game. In the games in which he played, he's had 284 yards in kick returns, including a long of 55, averaging 18.9 yards of return. No, sorry, 28.4 yards of return last year, 18.9 for his career. But he's a person who can help you, right? He's a guy who can help you a couple of different ways on the field. What would I like to see in terms of improvement? A little more deception, maybe, in his route running. Sometimes he's just beating guys because he's better. That won't always be the case. So I'd like to see him bring a little more deception. And, once again, being a little more able to sort of push through contact, which, once again, getting stronger might fix. And now, once again, I'm going to admit my various and sundry biases, is a player who's originally from the 757. So I always have a little special attention to those guys from IC Norcom High School in beautiful Portsmouth, Virginia. Went to Kansas and then transferred from Kansas a couple of years ago. And then once he got to NCANT, took off like a rocket ship. That's Karon Prunty. First of all, if this guy isn't drafted, now I'm not a conspiracy theorist or whatever, but I can remember a time when you would always see at least a handful, sometimes several HBCU players drafted. Sometimes, I was watching when Dominic Rodgers-Cromartie went 7th overall, right, out of Tennessee State. While I understand that is unlikely to happen again anytime soon, and Karon Prunty is not going to run as fast, if he did, if Karon Prunty ran 4.29, 4.31, somewhere in that range, then we should talk about him in the first, maybe not the first round, but certainly no later than the second. But he is a terrific player, and brings just everything you want to the table. When he first gets to NCAA in 2022, plays in 10 games, makes 32 tackles, just 9 of them solo. So he's not killing it as a solo tackler, but he had 4 interceptions, broke up 3 other passes, defended double digits in total passes defended between breakups and interceptions. Was 14th in the nation and second in conference in terms of interceptions per game at 0.4 per game. Tied for the lead in the conference in interceptions, was number 7 in the conference in passes defended, 40th in the conference in tackles. Once again, he's playing man corner a lot, so you're not going to get a huge number of tackles. Sometimes he's turning and running with receivers, which takes them away from the action. But right out of the box against NC Central, which is a big game. NC, for those who aren't familiar with HBCU football and, of course, North Carolina HBCU football in particular, the NC Central rivalry is, to me, one of the top 5 HBCU rivalries, and it's not talked about in the same breath with Southern and Grambling, or in my part of the country, even the Battle of the Bay, Norfolk State, Hampton. It's certainly one of the more, hotly contested rivalries in HBCU football. And right out of the box, right, comes out in that first game at the HBCU level, had 6 tackles in that game, all of them unassisted, and had a pass breakup. So intercepted 2 passes when they played South Carolina State. Just a terrific season. Sat out the 2021 season, and even going back to his time at Kansas, right? Started 9 games at Kansas, 26 tackles, 22 of them unassisted. Broke up 10 passes, had a tackle for loss, forced a fumble, intercepted a pass, playing against Big 12 competition. And teams are only completing 30.5% throwing against him at Kansas. So this is not a guy who was running from something. He was running to something. He would have continued to start at Kansas. Do not get it twisted. Or if he decided to transfer somewhere else within the FBS level, trust me, he had suitors, right? Multiple suitors. He went to A&T for a specific reason. He wanted to play there, and of course, he wanted the HBCU experience. And as crazy as that sounds to some, once again, I'm obviously biased, having gone to Norfolk State. It is not like the experience of going to a predominantly white institution. Plus, he's still going to play at the next level. So, I'm going to talk about his most recent season, where I think he was one of the top 20 corners in college football, period, and definitely a top 4 in my mind corner at the number 1. I thought he was the best corner in the HBCU level, but the top 4 corner in all of the FCS, Football Championship Subdivision. Didn't have a single bad game against UAB, right? Playing against a FBS opponent. Had a solo tackle, had 4 assists, and I also had a half a tackle for loss. Had a great game again against NC Central. 3 tackles. They really avoided him, so there wasn't a lot for him to do in the passing game. Had a tackle for loss against Elon. 7 solo tackles, right? Villanova, powerhouse FCS program. He had, once again, a tackle for loss, 3 solo tackles. Good game against Delaware. Great game against Richmond, against Hampton, right? Another one of those traditional rivals. Once again, a couple tackles, all but one of them solo. I'm trying to think of really his best game. And he had so many good games. I would say maybe his best game of the season was probably that Richmond game. 6 of his tackles were solo tackles against Richmond. Once again, this is a guy that people are starting not to throw against anymore, right? They're starting to just flat out avoid him. So he's not getting as many picks and passes broken up as he used to, but he's still super involved in the game. And like I said, a sack against Villanova. So he can run, he's got size, he's unafraid. Now, once again, could he put on some weight? Yes. He's probably about 183 pounds and probably about 6'1.5". So you'd love to see him put on another 5 to 9 pounds. I don't think he needs to be 200 pounds. To me, if he gets into the low 190s, I'm fine with that. 192 probably is about perfect for him, right? 192 to 188, not a problem. I think he's going to test very well. I think mid 4.4s. I think the bidding starts about 4.44, and I could see him, worst case scenario, about 4.52. But he just looks like a guy who runs well. So I'm excited about these players. Obviously, I talked even longer than I meant to. To me, there's something very wrong with the system if a guy like Prunty doesn't get drafted, and I think Rayshawn Harvey, in the right situation, more like an undrafted free agent, but could be drafted. So I'll have 2 more players for you tomorrow. Once again, let me know if I'm doing something right, doing something wrong, but most importantly, if there's a player that you want me to highlight. Now, once again, I focus mostly on players that are not in anybody's top 100, and probably not most people's top 200. I'm going to work my way slowly towards top prospects. 1 is because they're being talked about to death, and 2, My focus is trying to shine a light on those that aren't getting enough shine. Once again, Bill Carroll, team from Zinni Tixie New Media. I'll talk to you soon.